The year is 701 BC, and the greatest army on the face of the earth is standing outside your walls. You can hear them, not just the drums, not just the horses. You can hear the Assyrian soldiers sharpening their blades in the moonlight and laughing. Because they have done this before. They have leveled Lachish, they have crushed Sidon, they have scattered the northern kingdom of Israel like dust in the wind. And now they have come for you, Jerusalem, the lost city. Inside the walls, a group of men, Levite musicians, temple singers, the descendants of one of the most infamous rebels in all of Hebrew history, are doing something extraordinary. They are not sharpening swords. They are writing a love song, not a lament, not a desperate plea. A love song, radiant, royal, overflowing with beauty and triumph, addressed to a king whose glory, the poet insists, surpasses every son of men. My heart is overflowing with a good theme. Who were these men? What kind of faith does it take to write beauty in the shadow of an empire that has never lost a war? And why, 3,000 years later, does the love song they composed still move people to tears? This is the story of Psalm 45. This is the story of the sons of Korah. To understand what the sons of Korah wrote, you must first understand who they were. And to understand who they were, you must go back, far back, to one of the most terrifying moments in the entire wilderness journey of Israel. The year is somewhere in the 14th century BC. Israel has been wandering in the desert for nearly 2 years. The dust of Sinai is in their hair. The manna has grown monotonous, and a man named Korah, a Levite of the clan of Kohath, a first cousin to Moses himself, has had enough. Korah was not a nobody. He served in the tabernacle. He carried the sacred vessels of God. He was educated, honored, connected, but he wanted more. He wanted the priesthood. He believed that if all of Israel was holy, then he should be able to approach the altar of God. He began gathering men, 250 prominent leaders of Israel, men of standing and reputation. And together, they confronted Moses. "You take too much upon yourselves," they said. "All the congregation is holy, every one of them." It sounds almost reasonable, almost democratic even. But God's answer was not reasonable in any human sense of the word. The next morning, the ground itself split open. Numbers chapter 16 describes it in language that still carries a chill across 3,000 years. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up with their households and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. They went down alive into the pit, and then fire from the Lord consumed the 250 men who had stood with censers before the altar. In a single morning, Korah and his rebellion ceased to exist, or so it seemed, because buried in the genealogical records, in a single, quiet verse, Numbers 26:11, is a statement that changes everything. The sons of Korah did not die. They did not die. Somewhere in the chaos and the terror of that morning, as the earth cracked and the fire fell, Korah's sons made a different choice than their father. They stepped away. They sided with Moses. They chose faithfulness over family loyalty, truth over tribal ambition. And because they chose differently, they lived. Think about what it means to carry that name, to be born as a son of Korah, to grow up with the knowledge that your father was swallowed alive by the earth. A judgment so severe that every Israelite child knew the story. There was no erasing it. There was no rebranding. For generations, the sons of Korah served in the tabernacle and later in the Temple of Solomon, carrying their father's infamy alongside their instruments, their voices, and their unshakable faith. By the time of King David, they had been appointed as gatekeepers and musicians at the house of God. The Chronicles record them leading the people of Judah in praise during the conflict with the Eastern Confederacy under King Jehoshaphat. They sang when the army of God marched out. They sang when the battle was over. They were men who had inherited a legacy of catastrophic failure and transformed it generation by generation, into an inheritance of worship. And in 701 BC, that legacy would face its most severe test yet. To understand what Psalm 45 meant to the people who first heard it, you must feel the weight of the world they lived in. The Assyrian Empire under Sennacherib was not simply a large army. It was a machine of total psychological terror, deliberately engineered to break the spirit of nations before a single sword was drawn. Sennacherib's scribes recorded his campaigns with chilling precision. Cities besieged, plundered, burned. Populations deported, men, women, and children scattered across the known world so that they could never reconstitute themselves, never rise again, never return home. The Assyrians did not merely conquer, they erased. In 701 BC, Sennacherib turned the full force of that machine on the kingdom of Judah. He swept down the coast of Phoenicia like a wave. He crushed the Philistine cities. He captured Lachish, the most fortified city in Judah after Jerusalem, and he commemorated the victory with a massive stone relief carved into the walls of his palace in Nineveh. You can see it today in the British Museum. Sennacherib on his ivory throne, holding arrows in his right hand, his war chariots in formation, Judean captives paraded in chains before him. The image is deliberate. It is propaganda etched into stone. This is what happens to those who defy Assyria. And then he split his army. One column continued his campaign. The other, under the command of his chief officer, the Rabshakeh, marched to the walls of Jerusalem and began its siege. The Rabshakeh's words, recorded in 2 Kings chapter 18, are extraordinary in their psychological precision. He did not simply threaten. He called out in Hebrew, the language of the common people, loud enough for the soldiers on the walls to hear, "Do not let Hezekiah deceive you. Has any god of the nations ever delivered his land from the hand of the king of Assyria? Where are the gods of Hamath and Arpad? Where are the gods of Sepharvaim? Have they delivered Samaria out of my hand?" He was saying, "Your God is no different from all the other gods we have already defeated. Your city will fall, your people will be deported, your history will end." And the terrible thing was, he had reason to believe it because Sennacherib's own annals record what happened in those months. 46 walled cities of Judah were captured. More than 200,000 people were deported. Archaeological evidence confirms it. The sons of Korah themselves appear on an inscription found at Tel Arad, a bowl fragment listing family names, among them the Korahites, in a stratum destroyed at the end of the 8th century BC, meaning some of them were there when it happened. Some of them may have been among the captives who were marched north through the mountains of Lebanon, past the waterfalls of Banias, and into the grip of the Assyrian Empire. A fragment of a relief from Sennacherib's palace shows 3 barefooted musicians, Judean captives, playing their harps as Assyrian soldiers lead them away. 3 musicians, harps. The sons of Korah were musicians. The overlap is enough to make you hold your breath. Imagine being one of those men, walking away from Jerusalem in chains, the harp still in your hands, because even in captivity, the Assyrians knew the value of skilled musicians, walking north into the unknown with the smoke of your burning cities behind you. And yet, and this is the extraordinary thing, in Psalm 42, which is part of the same sequence of Korah psalms composed in exactly this period, the psalmist makes a vow, "I will go to the altar of God, to God my exceeding joy, and on the harp I will praise you, O God. He is in chains, he has lost everything, and he is already planning his return concert." This is the character of the men who wrote Psalm 45. But Jerusalem did not fall. That is the hinge on which all of this turns. The night the Assyrian army encircled the holy city, something happened that Sennacherib could never explain in plain language and would spend the rest of his political career trying to describe diplomatically. 2 Kings 19 verse 35 states it with the blunt simplicity of eyewitness testimony. That night the angel of the Lord went out and struck down 185,000 in the Assyrian camp. And when people arose early in the morning, behold, these were all dead bodies. Sennacherib returned to Nineveh, broken and ashamed. His own annals describe Jerusalem as a caged bird, and historians recognize the phrase as the diplomatic language of defeat. You only call your enemy a caged bird when you could not actually catch it. Jerusalem stood. And in the aftermath of that miraculous survival, in the golden, breathless season that followed the lifting of the siege, King Hezekiah of Judah celebrated something deeply, beautifully human. He got married. Her name was Hephzibah. Her name in Hebrew means, "My delight is in her." And by every indication, Hezekiah's was. The traditions surrounding her are rich. Some ancient Jewish sources suggest she was the daughter of the prophet Isaiah himself, which would make their union one of the most poetically perfect pairings in all of Israelite history. The king who trusted God against the greatest empire of the age, marrying the daughter of the prophet who had counseled him through every terrifying hour of it. We cannot be certain of every detail. What we can say is this: in the wake of miraculous deliverance, in a Judah that was battered, depleted, and deeply grateful to be alive, a royal wedding took place. And the sons of Korah, the Levite musician poets assigned to the court, were asked to write something worthy of the moment. What they produced was not simply a wedding hymn. It was a theological masterpiece disguised as a love song. The superscription of Psalm 45 tells us several important things before the first word of the poem is even sung. It is addressed to the chief musician, meaning this was composed for public performance in the grand liturgical tradition of Israel. It is set to the melody of Shoshanim, a Hebrew word meaning lilies, perhaps referencing a six-stringed instrument, perhaps simply evoking the beauty of the composition itself. It is called a maskil, a Hebrew term meaning a contemplative instructional piece, a psalm not merely for enjoyment but for understanding. And it is called a shir yedidot, a song of loves, a love poem in the most elevated, intentional sense of the word. The poet begins with a declaration of his own inner state, and it is remarkable. My heart is overflowing with a good theme. I recite my composition concerning the king. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. He is not lamenting. He is not pleading. He is overflowing. The Hebrew word is rachash, to bubble up, to surge, like a spring that cannot be contained. This is a man whose heart has been so filled with something beautiful that it is spilling out of him whether he wills it or not. And what is he overflowing about? The king. What the sons of Korah do next in Psalm 45 is one of the most audacious literary maneuvers in all of ancient scripture. They write a poem that works on two levels simultaneously, and both levels are completely true. On the surface, they are celebrating a historical king, Hezekiah, a man who in the 14th year of his reign had faced death twice, once from the Assyrian army and once from a nearly fatal illness, and had survived both through his extraordinary, uncompromising faith. A man who had torn down the high places, reopened the temple, reinstated the Passover. A man who had stood on the walls of his city and prayed when every strategic calculation said the city was lost. A man now standing at the altar of his own wedding, dressed in royal robes, his nation alive around him, the Assyrian shadow finally lifted from the sky. But beneath that surface, running through every line like a river beneath the earth, is something older and larger and more permanent than any single king. Hear the opening verse of praise. You are fairer than the sons of men. Grace is poured upon your lips. Therefore God has blessed you forever, fairer than the sons of men. The Hebrew word for fair here, Yafeh, is the same word used of Joseph, of David, of the most beautiful figures in all of Israelite history. But the poets reach beyond mere physical beauty. They are describing the beauty of righteousness itself, a king whose character, whose words, whose very presence carries the fragrance of something divine. Grace is poured upon your lips, not spoken from your lips, poured, as if grace were a liquid overflowing from somewhere above him and spilling out through every word he speaks. Hezekiah was known for this. His speeches before the people, his prayers in the temple, his letter to the northern tribes inviting them to Passover. His words had a quality that moved people, but the sons of Korah know they are also describing someone larger. And 400 years before the birth of Jesus of Nazareth, they lay down a phrase that the Gospel of Luke will echo almost exactly. All bore witness to him and marveled at the gracious words which proceeded out of his mouth. Then the poem shifts dramatically into the language of war. Gird your sword upon your thigh, O mighty one, with your glory and your majesty. And in your majesty ride prosperously because of truth, humility, and righteousness. This is not a contradiction of the love song. It is the completion of it. Because in the world of 701 BC, love without the capacity for justice is sentimentality. A king who could not protect his bride, his city, his people, was no king at all. Hezekiah had proven himself on both counts. He had faced down the Assyrian Empire, not with superior military force, he had none, but with truth, humility, and righteousness. He had humbled himself before God. He had told the truth about the crisis his nation faced, and he had acted with righteousness rather than political expediency. And his right hand, the Hebrew idiom for skill, for power, for the active force of a person's greatest strength, taught him awesome things. Then the poem descends into one of the most theologically stunning verses in all of Hebrew poetry. A verse so extraordinary that the writer of the New Testament letter to the Hebrews would quote it directly as evidence that Jesus of Nazareth was the Son of God. Your throne, O God, is forever and ever. A scepter of righteousness is the scepter of your kingdom. You love righteousness and hate wickedness. Therefore God, your God, has anointed you with the oil of gladness more than your companions. Read that carefully. The poet addresses the king as God, using the Hebrew word Elohim, the same word used for the divine being of Israel, and then, in the very next breath, says that God, your God, has anointed him, which means there is a God being addressed and a God doing the addressing. Two who are both called God and yet distinct. This verse would later become one of the primary scriptural anchors for the doctrine of the Trinity. But in 701 BC, in the hands of the sons of Korah, it was a declaration about the nature of this extraordinary king, that his rule was not merely political but cosmic, not merely temporal but eternal. Then the sensory world opens up, lush and intoxicating. All your garments are scented with myrrh and aloes and cassia, out of the ivory palaces, by which they have made you glad. Myrrh, aloes, cassia. Three of the most precious aromatic substances in the ancient Near East, each carried enormous distance by trade caravans from Arabia, from India, from the forests of the East. A king who smelled of these things wore the wealth of continents on his robes. The ivory palaces, Haichalei Shen in Hebrew, were an architectural reality of that era. Archaeologists have found ivory inlays from 8th century Judah, including fragments likely connected to Hezekiah's administrative palace at Ramat Rachel. And Sennacherib, with profound irony, paneled his own palace with ivory, the very palace from which he orchestrated the siege of Jerusalem. The king who smells of myrrh and emerges from ivory palaces is coming not to a battlefield, but to a wedding. The war is over, the bride is waiting. At your right hand stands the queen in gold from Ophir. Ophir gold was the finest gold known in the ancient world, traded along Solomon's legendary sea routes, appearing in the records of kings and temples. It was the gold of the incomparable, and the bride who wears it is not simply dressed. She is clothed in glory. Then the poet turns and speaks directly to her. And what he says is as relevant to a new bride in the ancient Near East as it is to a human soul in any century. Listen, O daughter. Consider and incline your ear. Forget your own people also and your father's house. So the king will greatly desire your beauty, because he is your Lord. Worship him. Leave what was. Enter what is. The old identity, the old family, the old story, the old name must be released so that something new and glorious can be received. The king desires her beauty, but the beauty he desires is not merely external. It is the beauty of wholehearted devotion, of a life that has turned fully toward its true center. The poet closes with a vision of legacy, children who will be princes in all the earth, and a name that will be remembered in all generations. And then the final line, which is simultaneously a promise, a vow, and a declaration. Therefore the people shall praise you forever and ever. After the siege lifted, after the Assyrian army retreated in humiliation from Jerusalem's walls, life in Judah began the slow, painful work of reconstruction. Many of the people were gone. The northern territories were devastated. Some of the sons of Korah themselves may have walked into captivity. We have that image of the 3 barefooted harpists in the Assyrian relief, and we know they were not all spared. But the city that mattered most, the city that carried the covenant, the city where the temple stood, that city survived, and in the surviving city, a wedding took place. Hezekiah married Hephzibah. The nation that had nearly been erased gathered around the ivory palace and breathed in the scent of myrrh and aloes and cassia. Music filled the courts. The sons of Korah sang, and for a people who had just survived the impossible, who had stood on their walls and listened to the Assyrian commander tell them their God was no different from all the other gods who had already failed, hearing a love song that called their king fairer than the sons of men, that called his throne eternal, that placed him in gold from Ophir at the right hand of God himself. That song was not just beautiful, it was defiant. It was an act of courage disguised in poetry. It was the sons of Korah saying, with every breath they had, "We are still here. Our king is greater than every empire that has ever marched against us, and his throne will outlast all of them." The ancient rabbis preserved Psalm 45 with such reverence that they placed it among the texts they called Messianic, meaning it pointed forward to someone whose glory would exceed even Hezekiah's extraordinary reign. The early Christians, reading it in Greek translation, recognized in it the portrait of Jesus of Nazareth, fairer than the sons of men, his lips full of grace, his throne established in righteousness, his garments fragrant with the oil of gladness. The writer of Hebrews, quoting the 6th verse directly, declared, "But to the Son he says, 'Your throne, O God, is forever and ever.'" Meaning that the poem the sons of Korah composed in the shadow of Sennacherib's army was ultimately a portrait painted centuries before the subject of the painting was born. Here is the final thing to understand about Psalm 45. It was not written in comfort. It was not composed in a library by a scholar with leisure and distance. It was written by men who carried a shameful name, the name of a rebel swallowed by the earth, and who had spent generations transforming that shame into something sacred. It was written in the aftermath of a national catastrophe, by people who had lost cities and loved ones to the most powerful military machine the ancient world had ever produced. It was written at a wedding that could so easily have never happened, because the city could so easily have fallen. And what did they choose to write about? Not their losses, not their grief, not the Assyrian army, or the charred cities of the Shephelah, or the friends still walking north in chains toward Nineveh. They chose to write about a king whose beauty surpasses all human beauty, whose words are full of grace, whose throne is forever, who loves righteousness and hates wickedness, who desires the beauty of his bride, not her performance, not her perfection, but her turned toward attention, her wholehearted belonging to him. They chose in the middle of ruins to describe something whole, and that is exactly why, 3,000 years later, in languages and cultures and contexts that the sons of Korah could never have imagined. Psalm 45 still reaches people, because at some point in every human life, the empire shows up outside your walls. Maybe it is illness. Maybe it is betrayal. Maybe it is a failure so complete and so public that your name, like Korah's, becomes a byword for everything that went wrong. Maybe it is a grief so heavy that the future feels like a country you no longer have a visa for. And in those moments, the question is always the same. What do you choose to see? The sons of Korah chose to see the king, not because the crisis wasn't real, not because the Assyrians hadn't marched, not because the deportees weren't walking north in the dark with harps in their hands and tears on their faces. All of that was absolutely real. But the sons of Korah had inherited from their ancestors who chose to step away from their father's rebellion a different kind of vision. A vision that could look at a burning world and still see, rising above it, the outline of a throne that does not fall. My heart is overflowing with a good theme. Not later, when the circumstances improve. Not conditionally if the enemy retreats. Now, overflowing. Now, in the rubble and the silence and the aftermath, the heart of the poet surges upward like a spring, because it has found something too true and too beautiful to be contained by any earthly catastrophe. The Song of Loves endures because it was written by people who understood, in their bones, in their history, in the marrow of their inherited shame and their inherited grace, that beauty is not a reward given to the victorious. It is a choice made by the faithful. The sons of Korah wrote 11 psalms that survived into the Hebrew canon, 11 songs out of a family history that began in fire and open earth. They could have spent those 11 songs nursing their ancestral wound. They could have written their father's bitterness into the liturgy of Israel and passed it down as a legacy of grievance. Instead, they wrote of longing for the house of God. They wrote of refuge and deliverance. They wrote of the city of the great king. And they wrote, perhaps most beautifully of all, of a love so magnificent and a king so glorious that even a poet with a tongue as ready as a writer's pen could barely contain it. In the ancient Near East, a poem was not considered literature in the modern sense. It was considered a living thing, a vessel that carried truth across time. The sons of Korah understood that what they were writing about was not confined to one wedding. In one besieged city in the 8th century before the Common Era, they were writing about something that would outlast Assyria, outlast Babylon, outlast Rome, outlast every empire that would ever mistake its temporary power for permanence. I will make your name to be remembered in all generations. Therefore the people shall praise you forever and ever. And here we are, 3,000 years later, still saying the name. The earth opens and swallows. Empires march and threaten and boast. People are carried away into captivities of every conceivable kind. And somewhere in the ruins, a poet picks up an instrument and begins to play. Because a heart that has truly seen the king cannot help but overflow. My tongue is the pen of a ready writer. The sons of Korah were ready, and in the end, so was the love they wrote about.